Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mariana. You are watching Mexico Relocation Guide, and we are talking all about Cuernavaca today. So today I have a really, really awesome guest, Susie. She's going to tell us about her experience living in Cuernavaca. Before we get started, though, if this is your first time ever watching a Mexico Relocation Guide live stream, bienvenido or bienvenida, welcome. If this is your very first time here and you want to ask questions, please use a button that's called live chat. If you're watching the replay, then you can post questions on this YouTube channel in the comments section. But if you're here right now, you're live, and you don't really know if you're here right now. But if you're watching this live, go ahead and use the live chat button, and you can post questions, which I can then share with Susie, and we can cover them on today's live stream. So thank you guys so much for being here. There is a free Living in Mexico email series that I have put together for you guys, because some of you guys are wondering, is Mexico right for me? And rightfully so. So I put together an email series that is 10 really helpful emails to help you decide if Mexico is right for you. I share information on residency visas, what the requirements are for that. I share information on bringing on retiree discounts, right? There's a retiree card that you can get if you meet certain requirements. I talk about bringing pets, healthcare costs, rentals, so much information. And for you to not be drinking out of the fire hose, I put it together into 10 different emails. That way it's not too much information at once. So the link for that is in the comments. And I'm putting it up on the screen so you know what to look out for. So look for it in the comments, and I will post it on our YouTube channel in the comment section as well. Bienvenido. So let me know, where are you guys watching us from? I see some people have been here a little early and posting your questions already. Thank you for being here on time. From Las Vegas, hi Linda. Canada, hi Craig. Thank you so much for being here. Colorado, thanks David. Hi Tony. Katy, Texas. Hi Danita. Hello from Michigan. North Carolina. Man, we are really, oh, right. You've got a follower. We've got people from all over. Wisconsin. Hello, everyone. Carolina del Norte. I love that you're practicing your Spanish, Jane. All right, let's see. Love the channel. Thank you, Russ. Thanks for the support. Hello from Arizona. Costa Rica. All right. Are you thinking about moving to Mexico from Costa Rica? West Virginia. British Columbia. Love it. SoCal. Oh, okay. Did you get hit by the hurricane? I would love to know. Did you get some heavy rain out there? I know that Hurricane Kathy is making landfall or has made landfall, and I know that some areas are getting a lot of rain. Yep, in November. Awesome. Well, Mexico will be waiting for you. Missouri, right? That's the correct way of saying it. I know people from Missouri get pretty tight about that. So thank you guys so much for being here. My name is Mariana. You're watching Mexico Relocation Guide. As I mentioned earlier today, you are going to learn all about living in Cuernavaca today. My guest today is Susie, who has been living in Cuernavaca for 15 years now and knows the area really well. She knows Tepoztlan really well. If you don't know where Cuernavaca is, it's about an hour away from Mexico City. It's in the state of Morelos. It's beautiful. It has a lot of natural beauty. There's hills, a lot of rain. So it's very lush, very green. It's known in Mexico as the Eternal Spring City, La Ciudad de la Eterna Primavera. And what that means is basically the weather stays pretty constant year round. There's not a lot of cold, not a lot of heat. Yeah, Susie's agreeing with all that. And she's going to tell you guys really just what you can expect if you're interested in living in Cuernavaca. I also have a small surprise for you guys at the end that Susie and I will discuss. So without me taking over, Susie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you so much, Mariana. Hi, everybody. I'm Susie. As Mariana said, I've been living here in Cuernavaca for about 15 years now, so quite a while. I'm originally from North Carolina, so I saw there were people from North Carolina. Woohoo! That's where I was born and raised. But I've been living here and I absolutely love it. As Mariana was just saying, the city of eternal spring, we probably only have maybe, I think it's between 30 and 60 gray days a year. And other than that, it is a beautiful, clear sky and sunny and 75, 80. It doesn't get too hotter, a little bit hotter during the hot times and a little bit colder in the cold times, but it doesn't even get lower than 50 degrees. So it's pretty much year-round pleasure.
Yeah. In fact, a long time ago, Hernan Cortés ended up making his big palace there at one point because he loved
Mhm,
the weather so much. This is
mhm.
a famous conquistador back in the day. And because he loved the weather so much, he ended up making his home there,
Mhm.
which kind of brings Cuernavaca really to a lot of history. It has so much history.
It does. It really does. And that Palacio de Cortés is right downtown. Um, and it is beautiful. It's a museum. You can go in and look at all these beautiful murals. It has murals that were painted by Diego Rivera. And it's got a whole bunch of different, it's a rich history and a lot of different things that you can enjoy.
Yeah. So you actually have children, and they
That's
were
right.
born and raised in Cuernavaca.
That's right. My husband is from here in Cuernavaca. A lot of times, actually, people who are from here, from Morelos or from Cuernavaca, they call them guayabos because there's a lot of guayaba trees, which is a special fruit, and it's all around town. I mean, you can just walk down
Delicious.
my street and I can pull some off the trees. So he is born and raised here, and my children we got married here when I was after about a year and a half, 2 years of living here, and we have three children who are 11, almost 9, and 5. So I
Yeah.
know a lot about these family friendly places too. And I have been teaching, so I'm a teacher. So I teach English and I teach in a school where my children go. Yeah.
Online, right? Like you teach
And
part
online
English
too.
online.
Online too. I teach in both places. I teach physically in a school and I teach online too because I mean we have very good internet service. We've got, the fiber optic internet service and so it works out well to have both things.
Yeah. One of the main things that I think people would like to know is if they were to move to Cuernavaca, would they fit in? Like what kind of community is there for somebody who's maybe learning Spanish barely,
Mhm,
right? Isn't
mhm,
really fluent yet. So
mhm.
a lot of people move to areas like Lake Chapala, Puerto Vallarta, Los Cabos, these areas that have a lot of English speakers. So tell us about Cuernavaca. How do you feel about that?
Well, Cuernavaca, what I love about Cuernavaca is kind of these small town feelings still. I mean, it is a city. I think there's almost like 500,000 people. It is a city. There's going to be traffic and everything, but you still can have really small communities that get to know you really well. And there is an expat community here. We actually there's a church that has their services in English and they're really inclusive. There's people there who from all different types of religions. And in that same space where the church is, there's an English library. And it is actually one of the biggest, only English speaking libraries, I think, in the state. It rivals some of the ones that are in Mexico City. And that pulls in a whole community of people, even people who don't go to the church, in that same area that get together and have tea on Tuesdays, and they go and have book clubs. There's bridge clubs with this whole expat community that really keeps in touch with each other. So there's definitely a community of people already here
Yeah.
who speak English. And there's even some younger families like mine as well. We have friends who are also, our children all speak English, and so we get together occasionally and have play dates and things like that. But in like the day-to-day outside, you are going to have a lot of Spanish. I'm not going to lie, it is not a touristy place like Cancun, so
Yeah.
you are going to have to know some basic. You're going to have to force yourself to know some basics to get around like with a taxi driver. Although surprisingly, a lot of taxi drivers will say, "Oh, I practice English with you," no, because a lot of
Yeah.
them have lived in the States or have come back, and so they'll know a little bit, but as far as like getting to where you need to go, you'll have to know those names and things like that in Spanish for the most part. For
Yeah,
the most
right. For a lot of people moving to Mexico, not everybody, but a lot of people, they're doing it not only because they're looking forward to a new adventure, but also because they may not be able to retire in Canada or the United States or wherever else they're coming from. And they know that the cost of living is way more reasonable in Mexico. So their dollar goes further. Could you
Exactly.
comment on that? Like, what has been your experience as far as your cost of living in Cuernavaca compared to, the United States?
Great. Well, I can answer that especially from my mom's. My mom, I'll let everybody know.
Yeah.
My mom also lives down here. So when I was pregnant with my first daughter, she got laid off her job in the States and she called me all upset and I said, "Well, do you want to just retire early and come down and help me raise the baby?" And she said, "Yes, of course." And it turned out to be really one of the best decisions I think her and I have ever made. So she retired. She has her own apartment here in Cuernavaca. She does know a little bit of Spanish. She was able to, communicate and take other classes when she got here too. But she loves it because it really is true. Her pension here can stretch for all of her basics and anything that she needs. She definitely, I think, um, I should give money amounts more or less, right? So she gets, I'm pretty sure I want to say around $5,000 a month, which is not that much. I mean, she was a teacher. She doesn't get that much. So I think it's around $5,000 or $7,000 US dollars a month. And with that, she lives perfectly well. She gets all of her necessities, all of her apartment completely paid off. We can do all of our entertainment. She says I would never be able to do this in the States. In the States it would be a lot harder for her to live on that pension. She'd have to be a lot more
Yeah.
budget friendly. And here, it's a lot easier for her to save up. She was actually even when she came down here, she still had a little bit of debt in the States. And because she was able to live and stretch that dollar much further, she was actually able to pay off those debts. So now she's perfectly debt free and living very happily here.
Yeah,
Um,
that's actually a very high pension. That's actually compared to a lot of people that are coming with
yeah,
maybe $2,000-3,000 a month.
yeah.
That's actually
I
very
said five. I think I may be a little bit wrong. I'm sorry about that.
no
I
worry.
think maybe 4 or 5, but it's it's
It
because she
covers
gets it
her
from
needs.
different sources. But altogether, yeah,
It covers her
she does
needs.
very
Yeah.
well. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so somebody had a really good question that I think should we should talk about. Like,
Okay.
the topic of walkability, getting around without having to use a car is something that's really attractive to a lot of people in a lot of Mexican towns. That's why a lot of people move
Hmm.
to San Miguel de Allende or
Hmm.
Ajijic or Chapala and cities like that, right, where they can walk everywhere. Leslie has a question. Is there a need for a car in Cuernavaca?
Um, Well, I would have to say not real. I mean, not really. My mom, who's lived here, she doesn't have a car, and she does use Uber a little bit. You can get an Uber just like you can in the States, without a problem when it's a far distance. And other than that, she does walk pretty much everywhere. Um, the good thing is it kind of also depends on where you choose to live in Cuernavaca because there's Cuernavaca is kind of long and extended is the way that the city works. And so if you choose to live way up north, then yeah, it's going to be a little bit harder or way down south. But if you live in the middle part where we live, then you really don't need to. You're pretty much in every neighborhood here in the middle section of Cuernavaca. You're going to be able to walk to a supermarket, you're going to be able to walk to a bank, you're going to be able to walk to most places that you need to get to. And that's one thing that I really love. We do also have a bus system.
Mm-hmm.
So there are many different buses that go by on all of the main streets, and they come very frequently on the main streets, and they can go into the little neighborhoods as well. However,
Okay.
I will say one thing that I've learned from living here is there's no real um, map of that bus system that I've been able to find. So while you can see the buses go by, it's not like you can just go online and see where that bus will take you. Um, I'll tell you a funny story. My children and I this summer, I have a car because I have 3 kids, so usually take a car. But our car, we had to leave it in the shop. And we were summer vacation. We didn't have anywhere to go. My daughter had seen a playground on the way that we were leaving the car at the shop. And she said, I want to walk to the playground. I said, all right, let's walk to the playground and have fun. So we walked to the playground. They had fun for a while. And then there was like 3 or 4 buses that went by. My son said, Mom, we've never been on the bus. Can we get on the bus? And I was like, why not? Let's get on the bus. But honestly, I had no idea where exactly this bus was going to take us. But each bus has these little signs in the front window that say the main places where they're going, the names of the streets or the names of the neighborhoods of where they're going. So even though I didn't know exactly how this bus was going to take us, I saw that it said Plaza Cuernavaca, which is one of the main shopping centers in the middle of town. And so I said, yeah, let's get on. So we got on the bus and took our little adventure to Plaza Cuernavaca, and the kids were so happy that they were able to get on the bus.
There you go. And now you know how the bus works.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
And I mean, it's
exactly.
very economical too. For a lot of people, the bus costs less than 20 pesos, 10, sometimes
10.
7
It's
pesos,
it's
depending.
between 8 and 10 pesos, depending on how far you go. Yeah, 8 and 10 pesos. Some of the closer ones that really just move between downtown and downtown, those are only 8 pesos per ticket, which is like cents, I think, in the US. So it's not much at all.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. That's like
right.
40 cents, 50 cents.
Exactly.
Which, if you made a few mistakes, it wouldn't be the end of the world for you to like shell out that amount of money for you to learn how
Exactly.
to get around in the city. Now, there's also taxis everywhere. Like,
Of
you'd be
course.
able to either call a radio taxi, like have a
Hmm.
radio taxi company dispatch a taxi for you. Maybe if you lived in one of the neighborhoods that was further away,
Hmm.
or also, hail a taxi from an area. Sorry, they're I don't know if you can hear that, but they're blowing leaves right outside my window. So sorry
I
about
just
that.
heard it. It's okay. Don't worry. Yeah, you
Um,
can definitely get the radio taxis companies are ones that you can call ahead of time and you can say, hey, I need a taxi for this time, or even at this moment that you need it. No, it might take a little bit longer to get to you, but it will, and that's a safe way to work. Or, like I said, my mom absolutely loves Uber and Didi. That's what she uses because it's easy for her to choose exactly where she wants to go on the map. So
yeah,
it
and you
works.
can see the rating, and if it's
Hmm.
a female or a male, and things like that, which
Exactly.
gives peace of mind to maybe some women traveling alone.
Exactly.
Um, A really good question because it does rain a lot in Cuernavaca. So Mexico in general has two seasons, either the dry season or the rainy season. People
Right.
do call it summer, but really it's not that it necessarily, well, depending on where in Mexico, obviously. In the beaches, yes,
Hmm.
it does tend to get a lot hotter in the summer. But in places like Cuernavaca, where it's pretty temperate, it either just rains a lot or it doesn't rain as much. So somebody wants to know, is it very humid?
Well, there are days, like you said, it's very much the rainy season pretty much starts, I want to say June, more or less.
Mhm.
Okay. And then it lasts until October, September. It's been coming a little bit later and lasting a little bit longer, I've noticed with this climate change that we're dealing with.
Uh,
And during the rainy season, there can be very humid days. Yesterday happened to be one of them. Today is a little bit, but as far as usually, no. Usually, the even in the rainy season, it will rain only at night. It is very unusual to have it rain during the day. So as you're going to bed at night is when you'll hear, the thunder rolling in and you'll hear the lightning, and then that's the way you sleep. I love being able to sleep to the rain. So it's one of my favorite times of the
yeah.
year. And then in the morning, you have clear skies again. And it does not stay humid. These days that are a little bit humid or different is because of things like the hurricane. Like you were just talking about how there's a hurricane in there on the West Coast. And believe it or not, that does affect us. We don't get any hurricane winds, we don't get any hurricane rain, but it does kind of move the way that the clouds have formed. And that's what we notice. When it rains during the day, people are like, oh, there must be a hurricane somewhere nearby. And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter whether it's in the Gulf or whether it's in the West Coast, it still will affect us differently. But normally no. And I see the rest of your question about mosquitoes, flies, bugs, cucarachas, scorpions. Um, there are more mosquitoes during the rainy season. It is something that you do kind of have to need to make sure that in your patio or in your garden that you don't have any place that's collecting water, because if you have like a bucket or bowls that are collecting water, that's when you get a lot of those like flies and mosquito eggs, and then they hatch and then you get a lot of them around your neighborhood. However, the city does come around every now and then with big trucks to kind of help fumigate, especially during dengue season. Dengue is a disease that sometimes passes through the mosquitoes. And so they come around and they do that. And you can also get somebody to come and help you in your house as well if you have that problem.
Yeah, fumigation services are very common in
Yeah,
Mexico, in any town, basically.
yeah,
And especially right in the very, I mean, Cuernavaca has like 350,000 people or something like that. Like it's not
yeah.
tiny by any means.
No, no.
Although it does have that small town feel, right?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, again, it kind of depends on where you want to live, but you can get into a neighborhood, like in the neighborhood where I live, there are houses that are literally owned by generations of families. And so you get like, oh yeah, he's my cousin, he's my uncle, he's my aunt, you know, and so yeah, my grandma lives up the street. So you get that really sense of community, and they block off the street for Christmas, and there's a big Christmas party with everybody invited, everybody cooperates, you know, so you still get that small town feel. Um, but honestly, there's also other neighborhoods where you don't like that, you don't prefer that. There's other neighborhoods where there's walled off. I don't know if you've ever heard, Mariana, but they actually sometimes call Cuernavaca the city behind the walls,
Oh
because
no, I
there
hadn't heard.
are, you haven't heard that one? Because there are a lot of walled off neighborhoods that
Mm,
you can't get in and see. So
mhm.
from the street, you don't know what's there. But once you get past that wall, it's this gorgeous, absolutely wonderful neighborhood or wonderful party place, you know, a garden or a special restaurant or something. So, but a lot of times it's kind of hidden behind these walls. So you really do kind of have to explore it and get into the different places, talk to people to help you get into different
Yeah,
places
yeah,
so you
yeah.
can
Who lives
see
there
those
that you
areas.
know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you might. What about you? Where do you live? Like, do you live more in a like in the city center? Whereabouts do you live?
I live pretty close to the city center. I mean, I'm still considered part of the center area.
Hmm.
Like I said, it's a kind of a smaller colonia. That's what we call the neighborhoods, colonias. It's a smaller colonia, but it is well known. We have a few attractions in this in our neighborhood, so we get some people who know. Oh yeah, I know where that one is. And because it's in the middle of the city and we're in that kind of middle zone, we don't get a lot of that extreme weather. So if you even go up just a little bit up north, the
Mm.
weather is significantly cooler. Going northern up to the city and going down south, it's significantly warmer. And that's because Cuernavaca is actually a city on the mountain. So, like, if this is the mountain, the city center is here.
Yeah.
And just by going a little bit north up of the city, your elevation, like the elevation extension, it changes drastically, and that changes the degrees, obviously. So there was also a question about scorpions. Some of the scorpions live in that hotter section further down. And if you live, that's where here in my house, we've never had one.
Oh,
No,
really? That's
yeah,
good.
I've never had one in this house, but I know my friends living further down south, it's something that they have to be on the watch for. So,
Yeah. One thing that I love that I think is very, despite a lot of popular belief, a lot of houses in Mexico don't tend to have these like really large yards like we're used to in maybe Canada or the United States. Maybe
mhm,
less common if you're coming from Europe, unless you're living in a rural town in Europe. But in Mexico, a lot of houses have, just like a patio, which is like a
mhm,
small little courtyard patio and maybe a little patch of grass. But in Cuernavaca, also other towns like Valle de Bravo or Tepoztlan, for example, I really do think that there's a lot of houses that have these like really nice backyards, and
mhm,
and honestly, in my opinion, right, my humble opinion, I don't think they're that expensive, like to rent. I see
mhm,
some that are renting for 700, $800, 15,000, 16,000, 17,000 pesos a month,
mhm, mhm,
which,
mhm.
I think is very reasonable for the type of house it is.
Yeah.
And you don't even need air conditioning. You may need a
Nope.
chimenea or a fireplace to cool, warm you up and maybe the cooler nights. But
Mhm.
to me, it's like very, very reasonable.
Yes. Yes, that's definitely true. The house where I'm living in, it's a little bit smaller, and we only have one of those patios. That's because that's what was in our abilities to pay for. But
Yeah,
I'm only paying, I'll let you guys know, 7,000. I only pay 7,000 pesos a month, which is like 350
350.
less than, yeah, 350 a month. And we don't have a pool, but we do have the patio. We have four bedrooms. I mean, it's in. It's a large enough house.
Right.
Now, I'm not in one of those. I'm not in. There are neighborhoods that have like 24-hour security guards, with these ones that I'm talking about behind the walls. And if you want that, obviously, you do have to pay a little bit more than what I'm paying. But like you said, easily, if you have 700 US dollars a month, you can find a house even with a swimming pool. You know, you can find a house with a swimming pool, with a garden, with inside of a security zone fairly easily. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Not a
And that's
problem.
one of the reasons why I think Cuernavaca is great, and some people should consider it because it has good
Hmm.
weather. You're within an hour from the biggest city in pretty much all of like Latin America up north, right? Um,
Exactly.
you have all the conveniences without having to go to the big city. Like we were talking yesterday, I didn't know this, but there's a Costco in town. If you're
Uh-huh.
into
Of course.
Costco, there's also just big chain grocery stores, which in my opinion
Of
are
course.
better.
We have three Walmarts, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
And you know,
it's a convenient place.
yeah, and it's beautiful. Like when it rains, the flowers really come out. It's just gorgeous. There's a
Hmm.
lot of history. The food is really good.
Hmm.
There are some very expensive restaurants, and there's also some very inexpensive restaurants too. So,
Exactly, exactly. It just depends on where you choose to be, no?
yeah,
But one of those things you were saying, like Mexico City is only an hour away, and there's actually we have very good bus systems that go all the way to Mexico City and back. They leave like every 15 minutes. So it's just like, oh yeah, I'll hop on a bus and go to Mexico City and go to the show or go to whatever, and I can come back home pretty easily as well. It's just
yeah,
over the mountain. You
yeah,
can see, you can't see Mexico City from here because it's a big mountain range that's between us, but you can definitely get there pretty easily and get home easily as well.
Do you guys do that from time to time? Do you take a bus and go to Mexico City and spend maybe like an afternoon or something?
Exactly. From time to time, we have done it, definitely, especially if there's some sort of event or something that the kids are interested in going to, like a Disney on Ice show or something like that, which you
Yeah,
might, of course, we're not going to get here in Cuernavaca, but it is there in Mexico City. So that's like a special event for them is to get to go. But there, I know of families that go every weekend, you know? I mean, there's some people who go very frequently because they enjoy it. They say Mexico City is emptier on the weekends, and so they like to go on the weekends when there's not so much traffic and they go to museums or art shows or we even went to a festival at a park once that the kids absolutely loved. It was like a kids festival at a park, you know. So there's a whole bunch of things that you have access to without having to deal with the traffic, without having to deal with the 25 million people who live in Mexico
yeah,
City. So it's like we can
seriously.
enjoy it and then we can say okay bye and come back home to a much quieter, well in my opinion, quieter life, and where I only have to, drive 10 minutes to get to Costco and 10 minutes to get back home. So it's a lot simpler, I think, here.
That's so awesome. So tell us about your kids. Like, I mean, do you feel like Cuernavaca is a kid-friendly place? If somebody was watching and they were thinking about moving there with their kids, how do you feel about that?
Definitely. I mean, gosh, there's so many different areas here just in town of like playgrounds and parks and beautiful places to walk. One of our favorite places is the Parque Chapultepec,
Hmm.
which is a state park. It only costs 10 pesos to get in. And it is like at least, I think, a mile and a half long, and it follows these beautiful springs. Cuernavaca is also really well known for their springs. So it has these beautiful springs and river that is going through the park, and there's playgrounds in the middle of the park, and there's restaurants in the middle of the park, and there's a petting zoo for the kids, and so it's one of their favorite places to go and just spend the day. So we have lots of areas like that for kids. We also have some really good schools. I know there's a lot of people with different
From
opinions, but
personal
I love my
experience,
school.
you know that? Yeah.
I love my school. Um, and you've got a whole bunch of party places, and it's one of those things where frequently people have their birthday parties for their kids. They'll invite everybody in the classroom, and it's a whole day affair that you get fed and they get. Oh man, we have so much fun doing the children's birthday parties with the piñatas and with all the different shows that they put on. And yes, it's definitely a family friendly place. I've loved raising my kids here. I've
Oh,
loved
that's
it.
awesome. Yeah, I think you're right. And, because it does have that smaller town feel, it feels like you can go out with them and use like public transport and these things like what you were talking about. Whereas
Yeah,
like maybe in Mexico City, I might be more like hesitant to do that, right?
exactly. Hmm.
you know, 'cause it's just like a massive town, a massive city with like so much going on. And then you don't know like which areas are safe or which ones might be unsafe.
Yeah.
Whereas Cuernavaca, to me, in general, every time I've ever been to Cuernavaca, I'm just like, this is where I would live in the future for sure.
Yeah.
Because it's just,
Yeah. I mean, I've loved it. I've loved it. Although I have to say one thing, and talking about all these parks and things makes me does remember one kind of, well, I think something that is general overall of Mexico is that they're really good at putting like installations of these parks and of these different playgrounds and these different areas. The government puts them up, but then sometimes what is missing is the upkeep, is the maintenance
yeah,
to keep it going. And so that's something that I've noticed that is it can happen. Like it'll be a really nice park, and then in 5 years' time, it's like, hey, what happened? This was a really good park, you know, and things will be broken. So that's, I'll be honest, like that's the part that kind of frustrates me. That's my efficiency American part is like, no, they should be taking care of this better.
yeah,
Um, but it does actually, it doesn't mean to me, I've learned to kind of say it doesn't take away the value of having it, you know, and letting your kids experience it. And even talking about, yeah, you know, you're right, they should have kept up with this. You know, things are difficult. If you don't keep up with them, if you don't keep working on them, it happens, you know, they
yeah,
get used.
yeah. Like they spend so much money building it, and then they don't spend the same resources maintaining it.
Exactly. To keep it up,
Um,
exactly.
yeah,
But I feel like that's something in general. I feel like that's something about the culture of Mexico that it's like they missed that
unfortunately.
part of putting into their government bills of including the upkeep of these places.
Yeah. Luckily, there's like so many younger, I feel, right? This is how I perceive it. Like Querétaro, Jalisco, Monterrey have like really young governors that
Hmm.
seem a lot more progressive and are starting
Hmm.
to understand the value, right, of like really showing taxpayers that they're putting their dollars to work and upkeeping these
Yeah.
things and adding things like public transport. And so hopefully, you know, that like permeates to the other states in Mexico
Yeah.
that are continuing. Yucatan is another example of this.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
oh, somebody has a great question.
Okay.
Wow, I'm a teacher too. I'd love to hear more about teaching there. That's a great question because there are certain professions that are reserved for Mexicans only. Now, being a teacher is not one of them.
No, being a teacher is not one of them in the private schools. In
No.
the public schools, yes. In the public school, if you want to be a public school teacher, then yeah, there's a whole bunch of bells and whistles and loops that you've got to
Yeah,
jump
yeah.
through. They have excellent benefits. They get paid very well, but it is not easy. I remember talking to an English teacher, a public school English teacher, and she was telling me that she had 400 students in like 6 different schools that she would see different days of the week, you know?
Wow.
So I was like, wow. um, but the private schools, there are many, many private schools in town, and pretty much all of them either have what they call bilingual, which means half a day in English and half a day in Spanish, or even more, a little bit more. My school is considered bicultural, and so we actually have 80% of our day in English and only 20% of their days in Spanish. So they are on constant lookout for good English teachers. I mean, even just being a native speaker and having some sort of TOEFL certificate or some sort of background, you will easily find a job.
Which is
There,
not hard to get. You have to take a
no.
test, you have to practice, obviously, or study.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's not impossible to get.
No, no, not at all. And teaching is usually, for example, in these private schools that I'm talking about, you're going to have very small class sizes. So you're not going to have over 20, 25 kids in a class. Parents are usually very involved in the education and they want to make sure they're learning and their teaching is a very respected position.
Yeah,
You hear a lot of, well, being a teacher and knowing how my friends are going in the States, sometimes there's very, very extreme um, things that are being asked of teachers these days, that they not just be a teacher, but that they be a nurse, they be a psychologist, that they follow the 10 individualized education
at
plans, the
some point they
IEPs.
might even have to have guns in the room.
Exactly. You're not going to find that here.
Yeah,
You're not going to find that at all. Teacher is a very respected position. The kids do get in trouble if they're not respecting the teacher, sort of thing still. And the problem, like you just said, the problem of like safety in schools, it's pretty much unheard of in Mexico.
Yeah.
You do not have any fear. There's no active drill, shooter drill things that doesn't exist. Like that culture is just, it's unheard of. And when it happens in the States, people are just shocked about how it could happen, you know? And, but it doesn't, it's not something that happens here at all. At
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. Whatever you hear about in the news of like cartel beheadings and shootouts and blockades, that's between themselves.
Yeah.
They're not, going out into a city and just like shooting up a main square or something like that, or a grocery store. So just FYI, like they're not targeting, Susie, myself, you,
Mm-mm.
or unless you're involved in their operations.
Exactly. You know,
Don't
I
get
mean, it's
involved
just
in their operations.
exactly. Don't get involved with any shady people and you'll be just fine. You know, I mean, it's definitely something that, yeah, you hear about occasionally, but living here, you don't hear about it at all. Like, I mean, yes, you hear about it like in the distance of it happening with somebody else, but as far as everyday people, that's not something that happens.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you get like, you know, crimes or wallets stolen, which happens in the States as well. I mean, honestly, I think
Any
that happens
country.
in any country in the world. But that extreme violence, and especially I've noticed personally that it hasn't been so intense here in Morelos. When I came here, when I first came here, actually, I think more than that, 2005, even longer ago, there was actually lots and lots of language schools here in Cuernavaca. There were schools that specifically bringing in foreigners to learn Spanish. And then as the years went by, after I got married, there was a really bad situation with a drug cartel who was here in Cuernavaca,
Mhm.
and it was a little bit like, hey, make sure you're in your house at night, you know, just in case. Like you said, it was between them, but there was still a definite sense of tension.
Yeah.
Um, and then it really did go down. We got into new politics, we got into some new governors, and in the past few years, it's been very calm. It's been very quiet. There's been nothing out of ordinary day of life, you know?
And I'm glad you bring that up because a lot of people, I posted a video on what it's like to live in Cuernavaca and I highlighted some neighborhoods and just some cost of living expenses, just for people to get an idea what it even looks like.
Hmm.
Um, and a lot of comments were like, Cuernavaca is super dangerous. I can't believe you're promoting it. And it's like, yes, it was. There definitely was a time where, and
Yes.
I can attest to this, my family members in Mexico were like, do not travel there. Um, but I do agree that they've done a really good job of cleaning it up and,
Hmm.
politics, governors change and all these
Hmm.
things. And they're doing a really good job. So I'm glad that you bring that up from your perspective, living there, that you feel
Yeah.
safe.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. But it has been a difference. I mean, when my daughter was young, when she was first born, so I guess about 10 years ago, you know, that's when it got really tense for a while. And it was probably maybe 2, 3 years. But in those 2, 3 years, a lot of these language schools closed because, you know, the US government set up that warning of, hey, don't travel there.
Mm,
And so many of the that kind of pull from these international places, a lot of it left, you know.
yeah.
But my husband is here, his whole family is here, and he was like, you know, we're gonna be fine. You know, this is just it happens occasionally, but then we'll be okay. And he was completely right. After a few years, it got much better, and you don't live that tension anymore. That you don't see it even on the streets.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. I get it. Somebody has a really good question. We covered already why Cuernavaca. Your husband is from there, so obviously you guys moved to Cuernavaca specifically because he has family there, and then your
Mm-hmm.
mom followed, which I think is awesome. Helping you take care of your kids, that's invaluable. But what's your favorite thing about Cuernavaca?
Ooh, okay. My favorite thing about
That's
Cuernavaca.
putting you on the spot, huh?
It's putting me on the spot. I gotta think about that because I've already talked about the Parque Chapultepec. I've already talked about, you know, living with my kids here. Um, I think there's a big sense of family and community here in Mexico. I'll talk about Mexico in general,
Yeah.
and maybe this doesn't apply to everybody, but one of the things that I absolutely love about raising my kids here is that sense of family and togetherness and support that
Mm,
I get from Mexico and from Mexican family members. I mean, okay, I'm going to tell you guys a little story. I hope you like this one too. So, my my husband's side of the family, he has brothers and sisters too, and they all have kids, and they're like stair steppers. I mean, we have one in sixth grade, one in fifth grade, one in fourth grade, one in third grade, like this.
Wow.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's kind of funny. There's 8 of them, and they're like one big group, and then the 3 little ones. But anyway, they're all like within years of each other. So at the time, we had always had little kids. We all decided to put them in the same daycare. So all of our kids went to the same daycare, and my father-in-law would pick them all up from their daycare because he was able to do so in the afternoon and take them all back to his house. And in his house, they would be playing in the patio, they would be running around and jumping, but then we would all sit down and eat together as a family because the main meal here in Mexico is usually around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, not late night dinner. So it's 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We would sit down and we would all eat together, and the kids would play together, and we would actually take turns cooking. So there were years where I only had to cook one day of the week. It was for 15 people, but it was only cooking one day of the week.
Yeah.
And every single day of the week, my kids got healthy, hot, nutritional, homemade food. And I remember saying, explaining this to my friends in the States because they would say, why are you in Mexico? Come back home. And I'm like, no, why would I come back home? Here I have so much support. I have kids who are, I have my sister and brother-in-law who can watch my kids. If anything happens, if I have to go, I have a dentist appointment. Let me go. Oh yeah, sure. The kids are safe here because they're playing together.
Yeah, that's
And
huge.
it was before the pandemic. Unfortunately, the pandemic, a lot of things changed, but that time of them growing up together and seeing each other every day with their cousins and playing, God, there's no value to me to replace that. I
Yeah.
mean, you can't replace that with money. That's just something that the kids have learned that they have absolutely loved it. They know they would help each other at the drop of a hat. Um, and that's something that I wanted to make sure my kids grew up having that. Because if I had moved back to the States, even if I took my mom with me, which by the way, she says, if you move back to the States, I'm staying here.
Oh, okay.
She
You
has
guys
told me
made it
that when
easy. Yeah.
we thought about it, she said, I'm staying here. Um, I would not change it for the world. If I moved back to the States, I would have been alone with 3 kids, and it would have been so much more stressful.
Yeah.
No,
It's
so
definitely much
here we
more
are.
like everybody kind of keeps to themselves and not like in
Exactly.
Mexico where, it's very inclusive and
Yeah,
especially if you have family members there, they want to see you, they want to hang out with you.
exactly.
So your kids are very lucky. They're going to have basically brothers and sisters for life.
Exactly.
That,
Exactly.
you didn't have to basically, have yourself. So that's
It's true. My cousins all live really far. I mean, I still know my cousins. I'm still in touch with them through Facebook, but it's much different than, being basically, like you said, basically a brother and sister.
So
But
I guess
even
that
that
answers
sense
that. Like, are you going back to the United States ever?
to live,
Yeah.
I don't know. If I say no, my best friend over here will send me a whole bunch of messages saying, no, you have to come
When can
back.
I buy your plane ticket? Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's always kind of in a long-term plan, maybe eventually when the kids get old enough to go to college or go to high school, maybe we would move back to the States. But at the same time, back in my head, it's why? It's going to be such a big hassle. It's going to be such a big culture shock. And here, I feel life is so much easier. I feel like life is so much simpler. There's not so much. Yes, there is some political movements, as you were saying. There's different progressive people, but it's not as polar divided as it is in the States. Um, I just feel I just feel safer. Here at Cuernavaca just seems like the best place that I could have landed up. And it actually, I don't think I told this story, did I? It was pure chance that I got to know Cuernavaca. Um, Originally,
No,
I
you
came
haven't
down,
told
I wanted to do an exchange program when I was in the university, and I wanted to go to Guadalajara. And I was so excited about Guadalajara. I did all this investigation about the city in Guadalajara was going to be. Like 2 months before we were leaving, they said, oops, nope, we have a problem. We have paperwork problems with that university in Guadalajara. You're going to go to your second choice, which is Cuernavaca. And I was like, no.
me.
I didn't even research it. I was so upset and I was like, I don't want to go. My mom said, you'll be fine. Just go. Just get on the plane. I had no idea where I was coming to. No idea where I was coming to. And
Yeah.
then I remember going over the mountains from Mexico City and just being in shock because I love mountains. It's one of the things I love hiking. I love walking around. I love being in the nature. And just seeing those mountains, I was like, wow, this place is beautiful. I had no idea there were
Yeah.
mountains. Like sometimes in our head in the United States, we think Mexico and you think the desert, that yellow sky in the movies and everything is
Of
going to
course.
be desert and old fashioned and dusty. That is not Cuernavaca at all. No, that is not here. You got mountains, like you said, it's lush, it's mountains, it's green, it's natural areas, which we haven't talked about too much besides the parks, but there are even hiking trails and places like Tepoztlán where you can go and really just commune with nature and see wonderful plants, animals, amazing places. So, well, I
Yeah.
hope that answered your question. I'm sorry it was a little long.
No, no, I think it's helpful for people to know. And I agree. Yeah, Tepoztlán, Cuernavaca, that whole area full of hills, full of lushness. Again, it gets a lot of rain, so that does make it really green. Great for people who are thinking of maybe having, some land and maybe having a farm or having some food. I think that would be a great place if you're looking into that. Or maybe you're just looking to get out and hike and be out, close enough to a large city, but also far enough that you could get there quickly. Because there is no airport in Cuernavaca. You would have to go to Mexico City too.
Well, there is a little tiny one. There's a
Oh,
little
really?
tiny
Okay.
regional airport that they opened up about, was it was before the pandemic, maybe about 5 years ago.
And you
It's
can
a
take
little
flights
tiny
to.
regional, it's a regional airport. It's further down south, but you can get flights to go like to Acapulco or flights to go to Baja California. You
Oh,
can't go out, it's not international at all, but you can go to certain cities around Mexico. But it is
I know
cheaper,
exactly.
honestly. Most of the flights are cheaper from Mexico City.
Yeah, that's great. That's even better for people who are watching this. You could potentially, do they fly to Mexico City? Do you know? Probably not. You could take
I
a
think
bus.
it's too close. It's too close. I honestly, I don't think anybody would fly from here because my husband likes to say that he can get to like the end of Cuernavaca and to the beginning, the first toll booth, because it is a toll road that goes to Mexico City. He says he can get there in 45 minutes,
Yeah.
which, yeah, you can. It's a little bit fast for what I
Yeah.
like, but you can definitely get there in 45 minutes. Obviously, if you have to go all the way across Mexico City, it takes a lot longer. It takes you 45 minutes to get there and then 45 minutes more than that to get through Mexico City. But yeah, it's very close. And there's even, if you don't like buses, there are even certain car companies that it's kind of like a DD or an Uber that
Hmm.
say, hey, we're meeting at this point at this time. Come get in the car, pay it, and we'll take you into Mexico City, and then you can
Like
go
shuttle
whenever you want.
service.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, but they kind of do it together. It's like a ride share almost service
Oh,
because
okay,
it's
okay.
usually a few people at a time that they do it with.
And what's also really fun for anybody who's watching, if you do end up driving between Cuernavaca and Mexico City, there's a very, very, very popular spot which is called Tres Marias, and you get some of the most amazing food that you'll ever have in your entire life at Tres Marias. There's like 100 stands, and they all have different food, and you can get quesadillas, and you can get cecina, which is a very thinly sliced meat, and you can get so much food. It's very, very
Exactly.
popular, especially for motorcyclists. Um,
Oh, of course. There's
yeah.
actually a huge motorcycle community here too. I mean,
Yeah, I've noticed
Cuernavaca is
that.
big enough that you're gonna find a community of people who are interested in what you're interested in. I have a friend who is part of a hiking and trailblazing community, and they go out every weekend and going to different trails and different places here around the state or in the volcanoes. We haven't talked a little about the volcanoes that much, but the
Mm-hmm.
volcanoes, Iztaccíhuatl and Popocatépetl, they're around Mexico City, and they're kind of between Mexico City and Morelos, but they're close enough for a drive. We go there actually every November, end of November, December for our Christmas tree. You can go and
Oh,
cut your Christmas. You can go choose your Christmas tree. You cut it down and you take it back home with you. So we have a real Christmas tree in our house every year. So, and a lot of people say, how do you have a real Christmas tree? You live in Mexico, and I'm like, yeah, but the volcanoes are really high. They
yeah,
do.
yeah.
Those pine trees grow there. They're really, really high, and so there is actually snow on there sometimes. My daughter, when we went one time, and she actually got to touch snow, and she was all excited at only 2 years old, but she was all excited that she got to touch snow. So I mean, those things do happen. There is a lot more than just deserts.
Yeah, right. Which brings a really good question up in my mind, which I've never thought to ask before. When there's earthquakes in Mexico City, how does that feel in Cuernavaca?
It depends a lot. It's very different. The soil in Mexico City For those of you who don't know, Mexico City was actually built on a lake, physically on a lake, and now a lake bed is how they would call it. So it's very, very soft soil. So a lot of times the earthquakes there, you can feel them extensively.
Mm-hmm.
And here in Cuernavaca, since it's on like literally the side of the mountain, for the most part, it's very thick, rocky soil. So it's not the same base, and we don't feel them nearly as strongly as in Mexico City. It's funny, sometimes the they will feel it. The earthquake, the center of the earthquake will be closer to like Acapulco, and Mexico City will feel it harder than we will.
Okay.
So
So
that
you
does
kind of
happen.
protect yourself by the hills and maybe the valley or like.
Exactly. The hills and the mountains that are around it, it kind of just it goes so far underneath us that we don't feel it. Um, However, there was one earthquake in 2017, which the epicenter was here in Morelos, just a few miles, and that was intense. That was the earthquake that I can tell you that was intense. That was definitely life-changing earthquake for many people here in Cuernavaca. I mean, honestly, I still get goosebumps just remembering that day because I was teaching with students in the classroom, and it happened to be on a day which happened the earthquake in 1980. There was a huge earthquake in 1985 in Mexico City on September 19th, and it happened on September 19th. And we had
Exactly
just talked
32
about
years
earthquakes
later,
that day in the
right?
school. We had just talked about, what to do in an earthquake and how to be safe. We had a drill that morning, and then the earthquake hit in the afternoon. And it I felt like I was walking on water. It was the strangest sensation that you've ever felt in your entire life, honestly. I live in North Carolina. I've never dealt with earthquakes, we never had it in North Carolina. So maybe people coming from California know what I'm saying when it was just like it was amazing to me, the strength and the power of the earth underneath your feet, that you just didn't feel like the earth was underneath your feet anymore.
Yeah.
Um, it really did
Yeah.
feel like water, but
I
luckily,
I know
most places were able to recover from that.
yeah, I know that earthquake was earth shattering. I mean, it was intense. And then there was like a second one like a week later, um,
Yep.
which I don't know if you
Yep.
felt that one really strong too.
That one was not nearly as strong. I mean, usually most of the time when they're like, "Oh, it was an earthquake," especially when I first got here and I'd never really experienced a strong one before, it just kind of feels like for a second that you got dizzy,
Uh-huh.
and then it's like, "Oh yeah," but then everybody feels it at the same time. And that's you look at the trees and you're like, "Oh, the trees are moving. We should probably move."
Yeah.
No? And so that second one did just kind of feel it was more like an aftershock. It was definitely not as strong, and I didn't feel it as much personally. But some people are more sensitive to it than others.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people in the school who just feel it right away, and ones who've lived through more. I think now I'm a little bit more sensitive to it now that I recognize what it feels like. But as I said, here in Cuernavaca, you're going to feel them a lot less than you ever would in Mexico City.
Yeah, right. Mexico City for sure is an area that does tend to get those tremors. Um,
Mhm.
this is a great question. So, SoCal Kids is wondering what is the best way that you or Mariana or Susie can recommend for finding more about Cuernavaca, for instance, a guide, a tour. Well, I want to let you guys know that Susie is our recommended relocation tour guide in Cuernavaca, and she's going to be added to the online guide after this live stream. If you haven't bought the online guide, buying the online guide gives you access to all the information about moving to Mexico, but also gives you access to our directory of contacts, including our recommended relocation tour guides. And Susie will be included there. The way it works is you would contact Susie, let her know when you're coming, preferably let her know at least 3 weeks in advance so she can work out her schedule. Let her know when you're coming, and then you pay her directly for her services, depending on the itinerary that she sets up for you. But you get to see different colonias, which are neighborhoods. She'll show you, what she recommends for your shopping options, like where you should buy your fruits and vegetables, where you should get, if you're really into baked goods, maybe she can recommend a panaderia or her favorite bakery. So yeah, she can tell you what it's like to actually live in Cuernavaca and connect you. And then her
Hmm.
mom is also a really good resource because she's retired, so she can give you her input into what as not working what she does for fun every day, right? Like, how does she pass her time? So anyway, yeah, that's what I wanted to share with you guys. I said I would share a surprise. So I'm officially announcing to you all that Susie is our relocation tour guide in Cuernavaca. So great question, SoCal kids. I hope that answers your question.
Yay. There's also a tour bus. If you want to be touristy, they actually have a two-decker tour bus in Cuernavaca, and you can sit on the top deck, and they'll drive you around all the different touristy and historical spots in
Oh,
Cuernavaca.
like a hop on, hop off kind of thing?
Um, I don't know if it's hop on and hop off, but I do know that it's a double decker, and my kids have said they want to try it, and I'm like, but we live here, and they're like, but we don't care, we want to try it, so I'll make sure to try it and let you guys know about it.
There you go. Awesome. So somebody wants to know about private schooling options for kids with at least some English instruction. Do you have a couple names that you can throw out there for people?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's lots of different schools here in Cuernavaca, especially the private schools. I'll say that the school that I work is called Marymount, Cuernavaca. And it's been here for 65 years and was actually started by two nuns who came from the US. So we've got a lot of cultural stuff. There's also a school called Williams, a school called London. Those are all going to be private schools that have very good attention, very good English levels. Hamilton is another school. There's many options, and if you come down with more specific, maybe your kids are very much into like sitting down and doing lots of homework, or with the students who really want to study, or maybe you have more artsy kids. There's even those kind of difference between the schools too. So I can definitely recommend it according to where you guys need, where you guys would fit in better.
So reach out to Susie if you're interested in that. She can give you not only a relocation tour, but also tell you which schools she recommends. And then you guys can hopefully tour them, right? If you set it up with enough time.
Yeah.
I love Cuernavaca. So thanks, Judith. Maybe you guys have like bumped into each other at some point. You didn't even know.
You never know. It happens.
Yes, the Queen died today. The Queen of England died today. Somebody said, did the Queen just die? Yes, the Queen died today. Very sad day.
I think in her sleep last night, but yes.
Yeah, for the UK. Let's see. Would you consider Cuernavaca to be a quiet city? Great question. Depends on where you live.
Yes, it really depends on the zone where you live and the neighbors who live around you. For example, this neighborhood where I currently live seems to have people who love to have parties, so there's pretty much a party every weekend, but it's not also something that's going to go until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. By 11 o'clock, they're going to be turning down the music and being respectful to others. I would say it is a pretty quiet city, especially if you're living in the areas, in the zones where the houses are a little bit further apart and everybody has their own yard. Yeah, you're not going to be able to hear what's happening, in the other places around you. So for the most part, yes. It kind of just depends on which zone you live in. But as far as like the difference between Mexico City and here, 100 times, quieter.
Yeah, or a party town like Tulum or Playa del Carmen.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to get that either.
Yeah. No. The thing that may wake you up is the thunder at night. The thunder at night.
Yeah, the thunder can get pretty intense. We do get some pretty intense thunderstorms, but it's usually just like the noise. The actual rain doesn't do too much damage, although you will see barrancas, these little valleys that are full of water during the rainy season do get full. They do get quite full.
What about flooding, Susie? Does flooding happen often?
No, as I said, Cuernavaca, because we're on the side of the mountain, it also has barrancas, which are like these little valleys. So you'll actually have neighborhoods on the top, and then you'll have to go down into a barranca and then come back up to the next neighborhood. That's very common here in Cuernavaca. And so there are some people in less fortunate situations, for the most part, who live on these edges of these barrancas, and they are the ones who usually have to deal with those flooding situations and those situations that, are not safe. But for the most part, in your house, you're not going to have a big problem with that. There may be some roads, like people kind of identify certain roads that if it starts raining hard, let's go around this way, because there's certain roads that do tend to gather water as it's like a flash flood almost, sometimes when it starts raining really hard suddenly. But then in an hour, they're going to be okay. It's just kind of like a slow drainage situation. But once you live in a place, you kind of get to know those areas.
Yeah, like
So,
what areas to avoid and which ones might be
exactly.
more flooding than not. Or if you go on
Right.
a tour with Susie, she can point those out to you.
Exactly. I could.
This is a really good question. Susie and I were just talking about this, and this applies to Mexico in general. A lot of people, and I get it, right? In the United States and Canada, which a lot of people are watching are from the United States and Canada. We saw that in the comments from so many people sharing where they're watching from. But we're so used to looking at a house online, kind of setting up an appointment online with a realtor, or maybe a house like an apartment locating service or something like that, right, ahead of time. In Mexico, it's very different. There really is a whole culture of like, there are houses, yes, of course, that you can find online on Marketplace or different groups or even some websites or some brokerages or real estate companies that post them. But truly, to find some of these deals that I'm talking about where, you're paying 15,000, 17,000 pesos for a nicer home can really be found by just walking that neighborhood and looking for a sign that says "Se renta," which means it's for rent. So somebody was asking, like, is house hunting easy there? Like, how do you feel about that? And we were talking about this, and Susie was just saying, like, I don't think I've ever rented a place by actually
From a
like
realtor.
working with a realtor.
Yeah.
So I fully agree with that.
Yeah. So yeah, Linda, it depends on your point of view of whether or not it's easy. I think personally, in my experience living here, it's actually easier to deal directly with the owner of the house, the landlord, because you get to meet them, you get to know them.
Yeah.
Um, and usually there's lots of conversations before you're going to rent something, before you get a contract. There are contracts, even just these landlords, you can just go to any sort of papeleria and say, hey, can I get like the standard rental contract? And they just have them, in these little mom and pop shops. So in that sense, it is a little bit easier. But I understand coming from a place that's not the city, it
Mm-hmm.
can be a little bit more difficult because maybe you don't know where to go, you don't know who to talk to, you don't know which areas to go to. Um, but the easiest way is kind of just knowing, okay, if this is the zone that I'm interested in, I'm going to drive around, I'm going to walk around, see those se renta, se vende signs, and talk to the people who live in that neighborhood. Um, One thing Mexico really has that is characteristic of Mexico, these mom and pop sort of little convenience stores, as we would call them in the US, which really in the US you only see like a 7-Eleven or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, here on every corner, you're gonna have a little corner store that's gonna sell, it's gonna sell soda and chips and but also emergency eggs, butter, which I have used on more than one occasion of, boy, I forgot to get this at the store. Oh, it's okay. I'll just go to the tiendita, the little store, and I'll get, the pack of bread that I was missing. Um, well, those people get to know everybody in the neighborhood. So frequently, those are people you can just talk to and say, hey, I'm interested in living in this neighborhood. Do you know anybody who has a house for rent? And I was just telling Mariana that there's in the neighborhood where I live in, there's one lady who she had her abarrote store, her little tiendita, her little convenience store, and people knew that they would go to her store to paste what was for sale, what was for rent in the neighborhood. And she was like the realtor. She would connect people with the people who had stuff for sale. And even her store was shut down for a while because unfortunately there was a fire. But even with her store shut down, people would still come to her house and say, like, hey, do you know who's renting? Hey, do you know who's selling? And she could still connect people. And so that's something that I think is characteristic of Mexico that is a little bit more person to person. Yes, you're going to find things on the internet if you need to, but you're going to get better deals and you're going to probably get a better treatment if you have that face-to-face meeting and discussion. I'm sorry, my dogs just came in. You're going to have a better face-to-face if you're going to have a better interaction if you have them face-to-face. But she
Yeah.
asked also about new condos being built. There are new condos being built. Especially before the pandemic, there was quite a few brand new houses and apartment buildings in different areas, of course, of town. Um, Honestly, with the pandemic, things kind of slowed down a little bit as far as building, but it's been picking back up, and I've seen more things and more people in brand new apartments and things like that.
Yeah.
For
I
sure.
mean, it's definitely going to continue growing as long as there's always room for it to grow. Um, Well, I think I have a lot of further questions, but I don't know, Susie, what your time is saying to you. We're past the hour now.
We can do a little bit more. I'm telling you, just my dogs unfortunately got here. So, but I can do a few more. That's fine. I'll just open. Maybe I'll just open the door so I don't think I can get them to get out. Out.
Let's see. Let's maybe do like, well, for her, getting residency or citizenship would be pretty easy because she's married to a Mexican national. So, and having Mexican children, you automatically become a permanent resident too.
And
If
grandchildren. That's how my mom got her
and
permanent
grandchildren.
residency. Grandchildren. Mhm.
As long as they're, I guess, under 18 and not married. I don't know the rules of that. You should talk to an immigration facilitator for
Yeah.
grandchildren. I know for children, sorry, it's
Mhm.
anywhere under 18 and not married. Um,
Mhm.
but all right, let's see. We have one question here. Um, ooh, what about moving there with a high schooler? You don't have a high schooler, so but maybe you
No,
can think about high schools.
I don't have a high schooler, but there are lots of high schools. I guess it depends a lot on the kid. It depends a lot on how open they are to coming down here and being in a different culture and being with a different language, because there is a culture shock. There is those moments, and it happened to me when I lived here doing my exchange. We're like, wow, everything's wonderful, everything's amazing, and then like 2 months later, you're like, no, I want to go back home,
Yeah,
and then it kind of regulars out, and then you realize there are pros and cons about any place. Um, but yeah, they can definitely finish a high school. There's a lot of private schools where you can put them into the private school without too much of a problem. They might ask for transcripts. So that is something, in the US, we're not used to having middle school transcripts, but that's actually something that they would ask for the most part, because down here, there are some people who only finish that middle school. That's the only thing that's required to finish by the government.
yeah.
And so it will be important that if you're interested in moving him, that you do ask the school where you're thinking about enrolling him, and the middle school, so you can have like a transcript or a certificate that they finished that middle school. That would be important.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, and it also depends if they have like an accredited program, where if they'll accredit those, or they'll credit those credits to the United States if he wanted to go to college or university in the U.S. That's something that you would have to look into, Laura. So I,
Although there are, like, the school where I work at, we have a high school as well, and they have a whole department, I should say, of international counseling, where they do just that, where they help students apply for loans and how
oh,
to get
great,
their transcript ready for colleges in the States, and it happens frequently.
awesome.
So yeah, so I mean, it is possible. It is
Yeah,
definitely possible, even if they want to go back for college. And it looks good on your college transcript. No, a little bit of seeing the world, a little bit of opening your mind and being in a different place. I always think that's interesting and have a good thing to do.
that's awesome. Well, I think that's all the time that Susie has, and I apologize, you guys. I know there's a lot of questions that you guys have, but I can't tell you enough. If you're interested in the Cuernavaca area and you want to take a tour with Susie, I think she's a great resource in the area. She definitely knows both cultures, right? She understands where you're coming from as a foreigner, and then also like the Mexican culture, right? And help you
Mhm.
kind of understand it all from that point of view. Plus, she
Yeah.
really knows the lay of the land in Cuernavaca and Tepoztlan, so she can show you the different neighborhoods that she recommends in Cuernavaca where she does her regular shopping. If you're coming with
Mhm.
kids, use her as a resource.
Mhm.
If you haven't bought the online guide, there is a one-time fee. You get lifetime access. I'm going to put the link in the comments so you can check it out. And you get not only Susie's contact information, you get immigration facilitators. If you did decide that you didn't know Cuernavaca really well and you wanted to work with a real estate agent who could give you the pros and cons of different areas, we do have realtors in Cuernavaca that we recommend that can show you rentals. We have them all over Mexico. We have private drivers that can drive you to Mexico. We have a variety of different contacts. Plus, you also get a lot of detailed information on how to do certain things yourself. So check it out. It's in the comments. Susie, I want to thank you so, so much for being here today. Muchísimas gracias for all your time.
Well, it was lots of fun. Thank you too, Mariana. And really, guys, I can't tell you how much I've loved living here in Cuernavaca. So I am happy and overjoyed to be able to share it with anybody who wants more information. Just let me know and we'll be in touch.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And you guys, thank you so much for being here. I will share with you guys soon when the next live stream is. But don't miss our next video. It's going to come out on Sunday. And it's all about a beach town that I think is perfect for people who want to live on the beach, but want to be away from the crowds. So it's not an overcrowded beach. So that video is coming on Sunday, the 11th at 3:30 p.m. So check it out on the YouTube channel. Thank you guys so much for being here. Susie, again, thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye. Have a great afternoon.
Ciao.
Bye.